talking about something a little bit different for our Aurifil Color Builders block. Now, this is the African Wild Dog designed by Cassandra Beaver, and I'm excited to talk you through this month's quilting plan. Up until this point, we have been using what I would call usual free motion quilting in order to quilt each of these blocks, and each month we've had a different technique to tackle together. This month we're going to be still using free motion quilting motifs, but we're going to use them in a slightly different way in order to create a form of thread painting. Now, thread painting is using lots of different threads and thread colors in order to literally create color and body and texture and image on your fabric. Now, a true thread painter might start with something as simple as a blank piece of fabric. And we are, of course, today going to be starting with our pieced block. But we're going to be using our threads to add a different kind of texture. You can see here that I have swirls, and I have switchbacks, and I have loopy meanders, and I have some McTavishing and some pebbles. And these are all free motion quilting motifs that we recognize. But notice that I have put them together in such a way that we are making this African wild dog very pictorial in how we are quilting it, all right? This is a further layer even than what we did back with the green sea turtle. So today I'm gonna walk you through step by step how I'm gonna add each of these layers. I'm gonna go one thread color at a time. And I've decided I'm gonna start here in the middle with these navy threads because that's gonna kind of secure the center of our quilt. And then we'll probably do the gray and the green, and we'll probably finish up with the gold that actually goes across our dog. Now, if you choose to create a quilting plan like this for one of your quilts, do keep in mind the bulk that can happen across the face areas or in some of the details of our animals. I used a clapper today as I was pressing my block to really make sure that I got these seams as smooth as possible, and I'm using a glide foot on my machine to hopefully be able to move across smoothly since I'm going to be creating quite a bit of detail. As you can see, in addition to our usual free motion quilting motifs, there are a few areas that are a little bit more scribbly. These are areas that are much more painter-like. I'm kind of scrubbing in color with thread to create some additional texture. This can feel a little scary if you're used to having some more structure like we normally do with free motion quilting, but it's also a really fun way to add a little bit of an organic or rugged quality to the quilting that we're doing. So let's get started with our thread painting light, shall we? As I mentioned in the introduction, I decided to start with navy thread in the center of the background of our African wild dog block. I'm creating a pretty basic depiction of Kilimanjaro to provide a little bit of context for our dog, an interesting background, but with relatively simple motifs. This allows me to create some stability for the quilt as I can continue working, but also to warm up my own free motion quilting skills and kind of find my groove for this particular project as I get started. I pretty quickly fall into an easy rhythm with these switchbacks, and then as I proceed to make the mountain, I decide to actually grab a ceramic pencil and outline the mountain shape of it. I had originally planned to freehand this design with just my eyeballs on my quilting plan off to the side, but as I got close, I realized I actually wanted to make sure that this looked pretty close to the shape of Kilimanjaro. So this is an easy way to add a little bit of marking to your quilt, follow back in with your stitching, and honestly, by the time I'd finished quilting this quilt, those ceramic marks had worn right off, making this easy peasy lemon squeezy. I add this outline of the mountain pretty easily and begin to fill in with some navy thread. I'm essentially building the rocks and dirt and all that good stuff of the mountain. You'll notice that I start out kind of swooping one way and then turn and swoop the other way. That's to give some dimensionality to these mountains, give a little bit of an effect of them coming together to form a peak. As we add the snow caps in a moment, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Again, just giving the idea of these mountains being three-dimensional instead of simply being flat. After using navy thread to create the mountains and the grassland behind our dog, and then switching to some gray to add snow, I put a light green thread in my machine to add these loose green swirls to the sky. Of course, the sky in Africa is not green, but this allows me to give the impression of the upper part of our quilt being lighter and brighter, like a sky space, but without putting too much contrast up there that might distract from the rest of the quilting that we're doing. These nice loose swirls give the idea of clouds and lift the eye up and provide some space around our dog. And then I finished up by adding some stitch in the ditch. While all of the threads that I used quilting this block are from the Aurifil Color Builders collection of 40 weight threads, we have finally arrived at a color that came with the African Dog collection. This is the darkest yellow, and it is time to add the finishing details to our quilt by filling in the foreground shrubbery and, of course, quilting our dog itself. I started with some scribbles and then some zigzags just to get the idea of leaves and grasses, and then did the same on the other corner as well. From there, I began to move up into actually quilting our dog. I started with some McTavishing-like shapes. These serve as a transition from the zigzags of the grass into some of the other shapes that I chose to put on the dog. These McTavishing shapes could be grass, could be muscle, could be fur, and really helps to illustrate the way that the African wild dog blends into its surroundings so well. After filling in the further back portions of the dog, it became time to add some of the distinctive spots that appear on the African wild dog that again help it to blend in with its natural environment. These dogs are really well spotted and striped so that they vanish against the grasslands upon which they hunt. I chose some really big bubbly pebbles here to do these stripes, or spots rather, and mixed them in with a few swirls just to provide some transition from the McTavishing. From here, I go into some McTavishing around the bottom of the face, zigzags around the eyes and ears, and finally finish up with a little bit of stitch in the ditch in the center of the face just to secure the nose and snout area. As you can see from throughout this process, we can take typical free motion quilting motifs and use them to add not only incredible texture to our quilts, but also a lifelike thread painted like effect. While this may not be full thread painting as amazing thread artists use, it's a wonderful in-between step and a fun way to step out of your comfort zone or your usual patterns of using your quilting to add texture to your quilts.